ॐ स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मामृतङ्गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति। Let us offer our salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the embodiment of all religions, the Supreme God Incarnate. Let us pray to Him to lead us from the unreal to the real, to lead us from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, to lead us from death to immortality. Today's topic I have chosen Sri Ramakrishna, the impersonal personal God. Swami Vivekananda, the foremost disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, describes Sri Ramakrishna as the impersonal personal God. In one of the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, you find this phrase used by Swami Vivekananda. Sri Ramakrishna, the incarnation of the Supreme Brahman. All the incarnations do come from the Divine Supreme. In order to give glimpse of reality to the humanity, people unnecessarily suffer because of ignorance, because they don't know the glory of their true nature. Their true nature is divine. Everyone on this earth is divine in its potential state. Intrinsically, everyone is divine. But then, for some reason, the impurities make the person difficult to realize the truth. So, people got locked up in unending desires. So people lose the spiritual track on account of their involving too much in the things external, totally become ignorant of their true divine nature. So, the incarnations come and teach us, look, this is the way you should go, otherwise you can't avoid suffering. Just as when there is no light, darkness will be there all the time. So you have to bring the light to get rid of darkness. In the same way, you have to become illumined, enlightened. Then only you will enjoy immense bliss, free from all suffering. Not only that, you will be able to share that joy with all the people. That's how we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, who enjoyed immense peace and bliss by realizing the Divine Mother Kali, Divine Mother of the whole universe. Then he wanted to share that joy with all the people. He didn't want to enjoy himself. And he felt more joy in sharing his divine experience. So he was even very much longing for the spiritual seekers so that he can give all his spiritual wealth to them. And this highest type of realization is extremely rare. It is not for all and everybody to rise to that highest level. A person who has risen to that highest level in realization, for him the whole world is nothing but God. He sees the whole world as God only. To him, the whole world as God is real. Other than that is unreal. So to such a person who has experienced that infinite joy, for him the duality of I, thou, here, there, this, that, all ceased to exist forever. He always lives in the bliss of his own true self, within and without. In Ashtavakra Samhita, there is a passage described by sage Ashtavakra Maharshi, the great saint. So, there he tells, where is bondage or liberation, joy or sorrow, for one who shines as the infinite and does not perceive relative existence? How wonderful! In me the shoreless ocean, the wave of individual selves, rise, play for a time and disappear. In Avadhuta Gita, another famous scripture, the sage Dattatreya speaks of God as beyond space and time, beyond mind and words. Thou art declared to be omnipresent. A pilgrimage towards thee means negation of thy omnipresence. Thou art declared to be beyond thought. Any contemplation of you implies that you are not so. You are declared to be beyond speech. Any chanting of praises to you signifies that you are accessible to speech. These are all the highest expression of the realization of the highest reality. Sages like Dattatreya and Jadabharat, another great saint, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, these highly illumined, enlightened sages, after their experience of that highest bliss, did not return to the relative plane after having the vision of the highest reality, which we call Brahman. Even Shukadeva, according to some, tasted only one drop of that ocean of Brahman consciousness. He heard the rumbling of the waves of that ocean, but he did not dive into it. That's why he could relate the glory of Sri Krishna through the Bhagavatam. The path of reasoning that Brahman alone is real and the world illusory is an extremely difficult path which is meant only for the chosen few in all the ages. To one who follows it, even the world becomes a dream and persons unreal. For most of us, however, the world is very much real with all its charms and disappointments. Like the wealth intoxicated elephant, we go down to the sea of life for enjoyments, and the crocodile of karma catches us in its inescapable jaws. We suddenly realize that the sand beneath our feet is sinking. Everything is whirling and changing. Like Narada Maharshi, in the spell of Maya, we too begin a life of ease and comfort, love and attachment, dependence and delusion. Then comes one day the whip of the all-changing and all-destroying time. Situations change, things drift, deluge of suffering, separation and bereavement, they all overwhelm us. The nearest ones leave for the farthest. The familiar faces fall into oblivion of death. Prosperity ends in adversity. The delusion of hope leads us, due to our deadly attachment, to the night of despair and loneliness. We grope for something permanent, something which will never leave us, which will always give us love, strength, power and bliss. We seek God whom we have never seen. Travelers on the way to God come to our help. They are saints and sages. They ask us to turn inward for infinite bliss, strength and knowledge. They ask us to meditate on the true self within. But philosophy fails to raise our deluded minds. Sages then ask us to meditate on the infinite in the form of Om, which they regard as both the auditory and the visual symbol of the infinite. We try, but our minds, accustomed to reach out to our beloved and dear ones, find it difficult to concentrate all of a sudden on a sound symbol. We seek for that infinite in the form of a lovable and adorable human being. Sages again come to our rescue. They ask us to meditate on or worship some specific aspects of Supreme Godhead, like Divine Mother Kali, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Krishna, Shiva, Jehovah, or the God in heaven. But our skeptical mind refuses to believe in these forms, rituals and worships. Bereft of faith, we ask, are not these symbols mere figments of imagination? Then comes one day a strange human being, embodying and even surpassing all the divinity that our limited intellect can think possible for a single individual. We wonder, is he a man or a God? He is an incarnation of God. As a finite man, he comes to lead us to the area of the infinite. He loves us more than we can love ourselves. With a superhuman power, he takes our burden out of a spontaneous compassion. He never seeks, he only gives and gives out of God's bounty. We take refuge in Him. We call Him Savior. We call Him a Son of God. We find a rock for us to stand upon and feel assured that no deluge of temptations or terrors of life will be able to dislodge us from the rock and make us drift like a broken catamaran in a choppy sea. Our hearts get fulfilled and fear dispelled. A divine assurance animates. Faith comes in place of doubt. Reason follows faith. There was an infinite field beyond a high wall. 4 friends went to find out what was beyond the wall. 3 of them climbed the wall, one after the other, saw the field, burst into loud laughter, and dropped to the other side. These 3 could not give any information about the field. Only the 4th man came back and told people about it. He is like those who retain their bodies even after attaining the highest realization in order to teach others. Divine incarnations belong to this class. These are the words spoken by Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel. See, incarnations like Chaitanya Deva keep body alive to bring spiritual light to others. Sri Ramakrishna said, an incarnation is like a hole in the wall of the infinite. Infinite meadows can be seen through the hole in the wall. One can even pass through it. Incarnations and Ishwar Kotis, your perfect souls like the apostles of an incarnation, are like the hole in the wall. Once a widow was stricken with unbearable grief at the death of her only child, a princess-like young daughter. She could not bear that suffering. She was most fortunate probably. All of a sudden Sri Ramakrishna entered her house. At once a flood of bliss inundated her. She forgot all grief and began to cry in ecstasy. "O Lord, this joy is too much for me. Perhaps I shall die of it. Tell me, friends, how shall I be able to live? Oh, now I have no trace of grief at the death of her daughter." Intoxicated with sudden joy, the widow moved in divine ecstasy near Sri Ramakrishna. Her sister came up and asked her to make arrangements for the feast to be given in honor of devotees. But the widow forgot all and could not take her eyes away from the Master and the devotees. Master Mahashay, who accompanied Sri Ramakrishna, told him the similar story of Martha and Mary in the life of Jesus, and how Jesus blessed the devoted Mary with the words to Martha, "Your sister is blessed. She has developed the only thing needful in human life." What is that? The love of God. Master Mahasaya said to the Master, "I feel Christ, Chaitanya, and yourself," referring to Sri Ramakrishna, "all are one and the same." He also narrated the story of the infinite field, the obstructing wall and the round hole in it, of which Sri Ramakrishna had told him earlier, and said to Master, "You are that hole. Through you can be seen everything, that infinite meadow without any end." "I see you have understood that. That's fine," Sri Ramakrishna told him. Through many mystic visions, Sri Ramakrishna was shown that the indivisible Satchidananda, the infinite reality, the bliss knowledge existence absolute, had taken a human form, his own form. After one such vision, Sri Ramakrishna said, I saw Satchidananda come out of this sheath. It said, I incarnate myself in every age. I saw it is the fullest manifestation of Satchidananda. But this time, the divine power is manifested through the glory of Sattva. Sri Ramakrishna said. While Sri Ramachandra killed the demons and Sri Krishna led the Kurukshetra war, Sri Ramakrishna lent reality to lofty ideas of immaculate purity, superhuman renunciation of lust and gold, bliss of devotion, highest spiritual transcendence in samadhi, the vision of divinity, and especially of the Divine Mother of the universe in everything of this world. He neither killed nor rejected anyone, but unified humanity, irrespective of caste, creed, or nationality, with his all-engulfing love for God in man. Krishna's or Rama's rajas, the dynamism of righteous war, was replaced in Sri Ramakrishna's life by Sattva, the dynamism of spiritual passion to move and have his being only in God consciousness. Sri Ramakrishna would be always experiencing the bliss of Divine Mother. He would be always speaking about God, and he was overwhelmed by describing different experiences he had during the course of his spiritual practice. Who can recognize the infinite in a human form? It's not easy. One needs spiritual practice in order to know God and recognize divine incarnations. Sri Ramakrishna says, blessed are the pure in heart. And one needs spiritual practice in order to know God and recognize divine incarnations. These are the words spoken by Sri Ramakrishna. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, said Jesus. That's why the simple fishermen of Galilee, Peter and Andrews, left their net at once and followed the unknown Jesus when he came to them and said, come, and I will make you fishers of men. It was the old Srinivas, the unlettered conch seller of Kamarpukur, who first recognized in the little boy Gadadhar, that is Sri Ramakrishna, the growing emergence of an incarnation of God for this age. The old man worshipped the little Ramakrishna with flowers and prayed to him in tears, O Lord, I will not remain alive to see how many divine sports you will play in your life as the latest incarnation of God on earth. But I know that you are God incarnate in this small body. This Srinivas uttered nearly a century before the world recognized the incarnation in Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that when Sri Ramachandra was going to the forest, he saw rishis meditating on the Atman, the all-pervading ultimate reality. Seeing Sri Ramachandra, they said, we don't recognize you as an incarnation of God. We know you only as the son of Dasharath. We are trying to realize the undivided bliss knowledge existence, Akhanda Satchidananda. Sri Ramachandra smiled. He didn't say anything. and left them in peace. But there were rishis like Bharadwaja who knew very well that in that little body of the son of Dasharath, God had incarnated himself in human form. Their devotion, as Sri Ramakrishna used to say, was the ripe devotion of or parabhakti, devotion based on knowledge. The highest devotees of Sri Krishna were the rustic milkmaids of Vrindavan, and Uddhava, the devotee steering the path of knowledge, told them that Sri Krishna is not just a human being, but the all-pervading reality, encased in a human form. The gopis reminded him at once that they knew perfectly well that Sri Krishna was verily the Atman, the immortal seer dwelling inside all the living beings. But they preferred to play with Sri Krishna as a small 11-year-old shepherd of Vrindavan. They did not want to see the Lord's cosmic form, which Sri Krishna had revealed to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The love of the gopis, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, was based on the most exalted knowledge. Sri Ramakrishna said, mere pandits are like vultures who soar high in the sky, but whose mind is always set on the carcasses in the burial ground. Jesus was driven out of synagogue and finally crucified by the Pharisees and Sadducees, the money-making priests. The faithful sinner Magdalene had the vision of Christ, the Savior, in the 33-year young man on the cross. Chandra Haladar was a family priest of Madhurnath, whose intense devotion to Sri Ramakrishna made the priest jealous of Sri Ramakrishna. Jealousy gradually intensified. One night, when Sri Ramakrishna lay unconscious in a God-intoxicated state in a dark corner of Mathur's home, this Haladar, who was jealous of Sri Ramakrishna, began to beat Sri Ramakrishna with a shoe, asking to tell him the secret of attracting the rich landlord. Renowned Pandit Shivanath Shastri was so much loved by Sri Ramakrishna, believed until the end of his life that Sri Ramakrishna was an epileptic. Opposite is the case of genuine seekers of God like Padmalochan, Keshav Chandra Sen and Bhairavi Brahmani, recognized without delay the incarnation power in the simple priest of Kali temple. Pandit Padmalochan was a court Pandit of the Maharaja of Burdwan. Despite his vast scriptural erudition, he was sincere and had no show or pride of his knowledge. Once Sri Ramakrishna went with Mathur to see the scholar. Instantly, the lifelong sadhana and sincerity of Padmalochan made him realize that in front of him stood not a simple man, but an incarnation of God. He said in tears, "The holy dust of your feet can turn scores of fools into pandits like me." The idea of an incarnation of God is a trifling one with you. You are the one who creates incarnations of God. Well, if anyone challenges my statement, I am prepared to defend it on the strength of holy texts. Keshav Chandra Sen was drawn to Sri Ramakrishna out of an intensity of devotion. He was seeking God. Hinduism, divided 100-fold into conflicting sects, could not satisfy him. Image worship of the Hindus appeared to his modern rational mind as only idolatrous, meaningless and superstitious. Keshav Chandra Sen turned to Christianity and felt the divinity of Christ. Before meeting Sri Ramakrishna, Keshav Chandra Sen was at the height of his name, fame, prosperity and greatness. He had already visited England and spoke to nearly 40,000 people in 70 meetings. Queen Victoria honored him. The English viceroy became respectful to his sincerity, devotion to Christ, and great power of oratory. But his sincerity led him to search, as Romarola said, for the Indian Christ, who would be living a life of total renunciation and intense love of God. At this time, Sri Ramakrishna, the priest of the Dakshineshwar Kali temple, appeared in his life, and Keshav Chandra Sen did not take much time to realize that there was the ideal for which he had been searching all over the world. Keshav Chandra Sen became a lifelong devotee of the Master. Looking at the photo of Sri Ramakrishna in Samadhi, Keshav Chandra Sen once said that this state of spiritual realization was attained only by persons like Christ and Chaitanya. Incarnations of God have the power to bring total transfiguration in the life of the so-called sinners and the fallen ones. Saul, the dangerous antagonist of Christ, was changed into Saint Paul by a sudden theophany from Christ. Jagannath and Madhav, the two despot drunkards of Navadvip, were transfigured into great devotees by the love of Sri Chaitanya. The spiritual transfiguration of the drunkard dramatist Girish Chandra Ghosh by the divine touch of Sri Ramakrishna is a well-known story. Drunkenness drove this genius to embrace all the accompanying vices. Then came evil days, wrote Girish, which allowed him no rest. There was darkness within, there was darkness without, darkness everywhere. Suddenly, by a spiritual experience, Girish Chandra Ghosh realized God was not unreal. But how to reach God? Friends suggested that he must have a guru. Restless, Girish went home, closed all the doors and began to weep. On the same evening, Sri Ramakrishna came to the Star Theatre of Girish in order to see a drama on the life of Sri Chaitanya. Girish hardly knew that the God whom he was seeking had come to lift up the burden of life from him and leave him go on rejoicing and free. The divine grace of Sri Ramakrishna transfigured Girish into a very symbol of faith and purity. He became, like Saint Paul, the first protagonist to openly preach to the westernized Calcuttans that Sri Ramakrishna was the incarnation of God in this age. The strange influence of Sri Ramakrishna was also exerted on persons belonging to other religions and even those who had never seen him. William Rigby, a British historian in India in those days, had heard of Sri Ramakrishna. He wrote, during the last century, the finest fruit of British intellectual eminence was probably to be found in Robert Browning and John Ruskin. Yet they are mere gropers in the dark compared with the uncultured and illiterate Sri Ramakrishna of Bengal, who, knowing not of what we term learning, spoke as no other man of his age spoke, and revealed God to weary mortals. Professor Hastie, the principal and a Christian father of the Scottish Church College in Calcutta, spoke out openly in the classes that it was Sri Ramakrishna in modern times who had attained Samadhi, superconscious state, as described by Wordsworth in his poem The Excursion. The unknown Indian Christian, Mr. William, was searching for God desperately in the northwestern India. Suddenly he read about Sri Ramakrishna in some journals. He came all the way to Dakshineshwar and met the Master. His spiritual insight at once prompted Williams to say to Sri Ramakrishna, "You are, sir, you are Jesus himself, the Son of God, the embodiment of eternal consciousness." Advanced spiritual aspirants found in the presence of Sri Ramakrishna a direct vision of their chosen ideal. Bhairavi Brahmani, the woman scholar, teacher and spiritual guide of Sri Ramakrishna, was the first to declare Sri Ramakrishna as an incarnation of God in the presence of Calcutta Pandits, and showed on the basis of scriptural evidences that the unprecedented spiritual experiences of Sri Ramakrishna proved beyond doubt that he was no ordinary mortal. One day, when she was offering food to the sacred stone image of Raghuvir, Sri Ramakrishna, in divine ecstasy, suddenly came and ate the food. She realized that she had finally found her beloved God in the very person of Sri Ramakrishna. Shedding tears of love and joy, she consigned the holy stone symbol of Raghuvir in the Ganges. Her long years of daily rituals had seen a consummation. The same experience came to the Rama worshipping sadhu Jatadhari when he found his beloved God Rama manifested in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. He too offered the beautiful stone image of Ramlal, which he had been worshipping for many years. He offered it to Sri Ramakrishna and left with a full heart. His sadhana had borne fruit. So also there was another great woman, Aghormani Devi. She was a child widow. She was given a place to live upon in a cottage in the temple premises, the temple of Bindu Madhav. She used to go and help the priest in plucking flowers, making sandal paste, cleaning the floors, all shrine work. She would wholeheartedly do it, and then after returning to her cottage, she would spend the rest of the time in just doing japa of Lord Krishna. She was so sincere and devoted in her practices. Sri Krishna literally came to her, showed her as Gopala, and Krishna used to play with Aghormani. Then it became so real. It was not the question of a day or two, months. Krishna was playing with Aghormani. It so happened once Sri Ramakrishna came to that place. The place is named Panihati on the bank of Ganges. There Sri Ramakrishna went to attend the temple festival. Sri Ramakrishna immediately recognized Aghormani as a very great woman, very great saint. Sri Ramakrishna could see with his eyes that Sri Krishna as a boy was playing with that lady. Nobody else could see that. Only Sri Ramakrishna could see. And then Sri Ramakrishna told her to come to Dakshineshwar to meet him. And one day she made a plan to visit Sri Ramakrishna, but she has to cross the Ganga. But then she has to carry the child, that boy Krishna. It was living. It was quite heavy. Anyway, She took the child, crossed Ganga by boat, and came to Sri Ramakrishna's place at Dakshineshwar. Sri Ramakrishna was sitting in his room, meditating. At that point of time, Sri Ramakrishna knew that lady was coming to see him. So, he was in the mood of Krishna, in a divine ecstasy. And Agormani came. She kept the child on the floor, and she did pranam, salutations to Sri Ramakrishna. When she raised from, after offering the salutations, she saw, to her surprise, that the boy Krishna slowly went towards Sri Ramakrishna and merged into Sri Ramakrishna's heart. That was the end of the vision. And that was the time Agormani realized that Sri Ramakrishna is none other than Sri Krishna himself. And Sri Ramakrishna then began to tell her, well, next time when you come, you bring this item. And that item was liked by Sri Krishna most. So, all the great spiritual seekers would see their chosen deity in Sri Ramakrishna. That was the greatest proof of how Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of the Divine Supreme. Many felt the presence of superhuman power lurking inside the body-mind of Sri Ramakrishna. So, I have told you the story of this Agormani Devi. There is another widow by name Golap Sundari Devi. She was one day surprised to see distinctly the hood of a snake which was devouring every morsel of food put into Sri Ramakrishna's mouth. In the scriptures, such eating is called an offering to the coiled power of Kundalini. Bhairavi Brahmani used to ask Sri Ramakrishna while eating food whether he was himself eating the food or offering it to someone else within him. Mathur Babu, the steward of the Kali temple and the lifelong devotee of the master, used to see some other person moving as if covered with a long veil through the body of Sri Ramakrishna. Any sincere soul or genuine seeker of God, whoever would come to Sri Ramakrishna, would feel the unspeakable presence of a divine power in the very presence of Sri Ramakrishna, who had lost himself to the Divine Mother. Thou art verily I, and I am verily thou. Sri Ramakrishna used to speak to the Divine Mother. At the very first meeting, Master Mahasaya found in Sri Ramakrishna, talking in his room, the ever pure Shukadev or Sri Chaitanya, expounding the message of the Bhagavatam. Keshav Chandra Sen thought of Sri Ramakrishna as the Chaitanya of the 19th century. Ishan Mukhopadhyaya, another orthodox devotee, admitted that Sri Ramakrishna's words would come from the deity. I speak as she, the Divine Mother, speaks through me, Ramakrishna told him. In moments of samadhi, an amazing transformation took place in him before the very eyes of the devotees. Sri Ramakrishna's face shone with a heavenly light. A young man used to stay with Sri Ramakrishna during the days of his Kali worship. He said, I see a light on your face. I am afraid to come very near you. One day, when Vijay Krishna Goswami, the advanced spiritual seeker, said to him, O Master, I know who you are. Sri Ramakrishna in ecstasy said, if so, so be it. Vijay fell prostrate before him and clung to his feet. Sri Ramakrishna went into deep samadhi, motionless as in picture. Same experience Madhur Baba also had. Once he was intensely looking at Sri Ramakrishna to know who exactly he was. At that time Sri Ramakrishna was walking in front of his room, back and forth. In one direction Madhur Baba immediately saw he was looking like Lord Shiva. And when he was returning, Madhur Baba saw him as Divine Mother Kali. He could see Sri Ramakrishna as Shiva and Kali repeatedly. And Madhur Baba got doubt whether he is having hallucination or it is real. So he began Sri Ramakrishna as Shiva and Kali. It is not untrue, it is true, it is real. So he immediately ran towards him and clung to his feet. Oh Master, now you can't hide your reality. You are the Supreme Brahman. An incarnation is the impersonal personal God, as Vivekananda liked to call, who draws us to him first and then through him to the knowledge of the infinite. To the deputy magistrate and devotee other saint, Sri Ramakrishna said, to have the vision of God and have the vision of incarnation of God, both are same. To others he said, through an incarnation of God, you can taste devotion and love. God's play is infinite, but what we need is only love and devotion. We need milk. This comes through the udder of the cow. The incarnation of God, in the simile of Sri Ramakrishna, is the udder of the cosmic cow. Devotion and reason are harmonized in incarnation's life. In them we can see, as Sri Ramakrishna said to philosopher M, both highest rationalism and highest devotion existing together, just as sometimes we see the setting sun and the rising moon in the same sky. As the water of the roof rushes through gargoyle, the power of God rushes through the life of an incarnation. He is like the morning sun, which we can see and enjoy with our bare eyes. The greatest manifestation of God is in man, Sri Ramakrishna said to the westernized Keshav Chandra Sen. There are small holes in the bark of a field where crabs and fishes accumulate in the rainy season. If you want to find them, you must seek them in the holes. If you seek God, you must seek Him in incarnations. These are the words spoken by Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel. With these and many other strangely simple similes, born out of his deep mystical visions, Sri Ramakrishna used to explain the otherwise difficult concept of an incarnation, the impersonal personal God. The vision of the enlightenment, according to Shankara, is a vision of the ultimate truth. Why does the infinite appear as finite? History tells us that whenever humanity has lost sight of the way to the kingdom of God, God has appeared as man in order to lead man to God. He comes in simple guise like the carpenter's son in Judava or the cowherd boy of Vrindavan. Sri Ramakrishna himself came as a poor Brahmin boy of an unknown village of Bengal, Kamatukur. When God plays as man, Sri Ramakrishna is to teach. He behaves like an ordinary human being. He feels the same thirst, hunger, disease, bereavement like any other human being. Sri Ramchandra wept at the bereavement of Sita. That's why it is so difficult to identify them. He is like the unknown tree, according to Sri Ramakrishna's simile, which everybody admires but no one knows. An incarnation is like a king who comes in the guise of a beggar to look into the welfare of his subjects who forgot out of circumstantial sufferings that they too were heirs to the same. We are like the deluded prince, according to Vivekananda, who moves with a begging bowl over a gold mine which belongs to him. Incarnations come to tell us that the kingdom of God is for us too, that it is within us. Like a king in disguise, Sri Ramakrishna came to help men and women who were suffering, who were lost and downtrodden, who sought God with all their soul and yet failed, who decried God with all their arrogance and yet who sobbed at heart, who lost the moorings of life and felt destined to die in the darkness of ignorance. Like Christ, Buddha and Chaitanya, Sri Ramakrishna himself went from house to house, not with the pride of an accomplished teacher, but with the passion of a Savior who came to accept all the sins, pains and tribulations of humanity in order to lead them to divine life and everlasting bliss. With infinite pain and sacrifice, he paved the new way to divine life suited for this age and lead us along the way. Incarnations of God are like great giant ships. Sri Ramakrishna said, they themselves can cross the ocean of life and carry others also. Their sadhana and austerities are for the good of humanity. An incarnation comes to teach people ecstatic love of God. It comes to teach devotion and inspires us to direct all our human emotions and moods towards God and find fulfillment in life. Even in Vedantic texts, where pure knowledge is extolled, the possibility of the infinite expressing through the finite man is not denied. Even in the Vedantic texts, where pure knowledge is extolled, the possibility of the infinite expressing through the finite man is not denied. A knower of Brahman becomes verily the Brahman itself, declares the Upanishads. The Taittiriya Upanishad says, he that is here in the human person and he that is here in the sun are one. Shankaracharya, commenting on this idea, writes, in the sun is found the highest perfection of duality, consisting of the formed and formless. If from the standpoint of the supreme bliss, that perfection can be placed on the same footing with the human personality, after eliminating the peculiarities of the latter, there will remain no superiority or inferiority for one who attains that goal. Commentator Anandagiri follows the same line of thought taken up by Shankaracharya. The same unsurpassing bliss of the conscious reality that is reflected on a superior medium, namely the sun, is also reflected on an inferior medium, a human being possessing head, hand, etc. Thus, from the standpoint of supreme bliss, the two distinct entities are on a par and intrinsically they are the same. The cosmic person, Vaishvanara, or the Supreme Lord, is hidden in human beings, says the Brahma Sutras. Even though the Supreme Lord transcends all limitations, still there can be a spatial limitation for the sake of his manifestation, interprets Shankaracharya. The Supreme Self, according to him, which has no spatial limitation, has to be meditated on as though spatially determined. In meditation, we try to visualize a space-time limited form of the all-pervading reality in the internal space in our heart. Human imagination is essentially anthropomorphic. The moment we try to think, meditate, or visualize the infinite, we grope towards a finite form. The soul-stirring songs of Brahma Samaj praise the glory of the formless God, yet the ideas of a loving face, the radiant face like the sun, the feet where we must take refuge, creeping. Man is bound to worship God as man, Vivekananda said, as cows are inclined to look for an infinitely big cow as their God. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary to worship God as man, says Vivekananda, and blessed are those races which has such a God-man to worship. God cannot be worshipped. He is the immanent being in the universe. It is only to His manifestation as man that we can pray. Just as words of Vivekananda in the complete books. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, fools, not knowing that I, the omnipresent God of the universe, have taken this human form, deride me and think that cannot be. To think that God cannot have a form is to limit the unlimited. The incarnations come in every age to demonstrate the power and divinity of God. These great incarnations of God are to be worshipped. Not only so, they alone can be worshipped, said Vivekananda in complete books. In Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda found the greatest manifestation of incarnation power so far recorded in the history of humanity. In the celebrated Vesper song on Sri Ramakrishna, which is sung all over the world, Sri Ramakrishna's name is nowhere mentioned. He is verily the infinite indefinite. Sri Ramakrishna is verily the infinite indefinite. So, Sri Ramakrishna, the impersonal personal God, the highest reality, has come in the form of Sri Ramakrishna, so that all the spiritual seekers may have the experience of the highest reality through Sri Ramakrishna. Following what Sri Ramakrishna has said, if the person is following the instructions carefully and sincerely, he would realize the infinite reality. So it is possible to have that realization, and this human body is meant for realizing the truth. What is needed is that we should prepare properly to experience that reality. So, understanding the teachings, practicing them sincerely, take us to the goal. That means we can realize God in this very life, and whatever we seek, that we get. If you are satisfied with the divine form of God, well, you will get it. And again, if you want to have the formless aspect of God, that also you can realize. Both are true. God with form is as real as God without form. Sri Ramakrishna has said very clearly, and himself experienced all these different stages in spiritual life, and thus he has integrated all the spiritual experiences. Just like all the rivers mingle in the ocean, all the spiritual experiences are mingling in the highest realization of Sri Ramakrishna. So, Sri Ramakrishna is looked upon as the impersonal personal God. Thank you very much. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. May the Lord protect us, may He nourish us, may our knowledge be fruitful and enlightened, may we not hate each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.